Thanks, Cash. All right. Hello to all of our online learners and cherubs over in Tertiary's room. Today we're going to be talking about English America. English America, the roots of English America. This is, of course, going to be a little bit of overlap from the empires discussion that I posted the other day. But the English America, we are planting the seeds for the eventual United States. It's important to understand how we got to that point. Now, if you remember when I talked about the empires, we talked about the Spanish and the Portuguese and how they were really the first two rivals for the New World. But you also had a rivalry between all of those nations, and we're adding in France and the Netherlands, and England. England is late to the show. And they're late to the show because of their rivalry with Spain, which all came down to religious differences. There were religious differences because of this man right here, Henry VIII. Henry VIII decided that he wanted to have a divorce from his first wife because she was not bearing him a son, which in a monarchy is somewhat important, of course. So, of course, he decides to try and get a divorce from Catherine of Aragon being Spanish, and, of course, related to the royal family. That's very complex. That and the fact that in the Catholic faith, you cannot get divorced. Okay, you have to ask the Pope for it. And this man had been the defender of the faith, of the Catholic Church. He had been the Pope's right-hand man, if you will. He thought he was in good with the Pope enough that the Pope would let it slide, give him his divorce, and move on. Didn't happen that way. The Pope said, nope, you're married, that's it. Nothing you can do about it. Now, keep in mind, he wasn't exactly being a good Catholic because he had relationships on the side, one of which was with a woman by the name of Anne Boleyn. So he was already very much having affairs and going against the Catholic faith in that regard, but it wasn't official. And a lot of these, if you read a tremendous amount of English history, or really any royal history, you're going to see a ton of bastard children along the way. Children that were born out of wedlock who cannot inherit the throne. So he needs this to be official. When the Pope denies it, he ends up, and this is very oversimplifying it, but if you take a AP Euro, you'll get knee-deep into this when you're seniors. Bottom line is he looks at the Pope and says, well, if you're not going to do what I need you to do for me and for England, then I'm just going to leave the church and start my own. So he decides to protest, and that's where you get the term Protestant from. Okay, it's a protest of the Catholic Church, which really started with Martin Luther and Jan Hus and a whole host of other religious reformers. He just happens to hop on the bandwagon. He's not looking to reform anything as much as he's looking to hold on to power and secure his legacy. Well, he starts the English church, the Anglican Church. Okay, the Anglican Church with him as kind of the figurehead of the church as well. So you're talking about him being the King of England and the leader of the Anglican faith. So he's consolidated all that power under him. And were there Catholics in England that hated this? Yes, there were people that rebelled against him. Obviously, the priests and the bishops in the Catholic Church were totally against this. And, of course, they had religious issues because of that. The Irish also revolt because they are good, solid Catholics at this point. And they don't like the fact that's happening. They're being colonized by the English. They're already politically being repressed, and now they're going to be repressed religiously as well. So there's all kinds of tumults and problems during his reign because of this. As if it wasn't already ridiculous in its own right, after his death, okay, he has even more. His impact is felt for generations to come. All right? Why? His son that he finally has with, I believe, his third wife, third or fourth, one of them, she dies in childbirth. He has 6 wives, by the way, 6 wives of Henry VIII. Should kind of mention. He had, and for those of you saying, what 6 women would marry that? He's the King of England. He can pretty much do what he wants. Okay? First wife he divorces, second wife he beheads, third one dies of natural causes. Fourth one, I think, is the one that died in childbirth, but don't quote me. Fifth one, also beheaded. Sixth one dies of old age. Okay? So if you're keeping track at home, 2 die naturally, 2 die because of beheadings, 1 divorce, and then poor Catherine Parr was there at the end when he was just really old, really disgusting, and really syphilitic. So bottom line is, finally get rid of King Henry. The problem is his son doesn't last very long. So what to do? He's got 2 daughters. One is named Mary, one is named Elizabeth. Mary was born to Catherine of Aragon, who obviously doesn't like her dad because she was raised Catholic and raised by Catherine, so she has some daddy issues. And you have Elizabeth, who daddy beheaded mommy. So you would think that Elizabeth would have some daddy issues. Not really. She actually kind of sympathizes with dad because she's a lot like her father. Okay, she definitely takes after her father when it comes to her mentality. Well, Mary is the oldest. She seizes the throne, becomes Mary the First. She marries Philip II of Spain. They have a Catholic wedding, and she is devoted towards turning England back into a good Catholic nation. And the defender of the faith at that point was Philip II. So her husband is all about turning England back into a good Catholic realm. Well, Mary unfortunately doesn't last long enough. She ends up dying. She doesn't have any children. So now who takes over? It's Elizabeth. Okay, there's of course some upheaval about that. There's the poor Lady Jane Grey is basically queen for like 9 days, but then she's overthrown by Elizabeth, and Lady Jane Grey eventually loses her head because of it. If you ever tour London and go to the Tower of London, you can see the spot where she was beheaded. Okay, her and a whole host of other people. There were a lot of fallen crowns all over the place, a lot of heads lying around during this time period because of the death penalty being used quite a bit. And if you ever go, and I strongly advise you to go to London at some point in your life because it's really interesting. All kinds of history, and especially the Tower of London is just fascinating. But Elizabeth takes over. She basically decides early on she's not going to get married, so hence she's called the Virgin Queen. Now, if you do any research on her, you will find out that she was anything but a virgin. Okay? She had her relations, and before you judge, it's not like the guys were any better. Okay? I don't care what king you point to. And that, I should say, take that back. That's not fair. There are some kings that are very devout, very loyal to their queens, but not many, and especially in this family line here. Okay, the Tudors are pretty messy. There's a reason why things like Netflix make shows about the Tudors. They're super interesting and really, I mean, they are, for lack of better terminology, they are the Kardashians of the 15 and 1600s. They're the family that everybody just finds fascinating. Okay, Elizabeth takes over, and immediately she has issues. Because her brother-in-law, who has recently lost his wife, immediately says, hey, I got an idea. We should get married. She finds that a little disgusting, okay? And quite honestly doesn't want to get married to the King of Spain, okay? And for those of you saying, well, that's messed up, look at a royal family tree every now and then. You will see some pretty messed up stuff. Okay, Philip II of Spain, the guy who had married Mary, her half-sister. Mary dies. Philip then goes, man, that's sad. My wife is dead, and then tries to marry the sister. Okay, so that it's different. It's different. Okay, so needless to say, Elizabeth denies him, so he's already a little upset about that. Then she was raised Protestant, like her daddy. Okay, she was raised Anglican. Okay, to honor the Anglican Church her father created. Okay. So she changes England back to being Anglican. So the Catholics are all up in upheaval again. Okay? The Pope wants England to be completely Catholic. He thought he was going to, reclaim the territory under the Catholic banner with Mary. But when Mary dies, it throws it all into upheaval. So not surprisingly, Elizabeth has her issues at home. And look, she's big on adventure. She's big on sending these guys out and trying to claim territory. She's big on privateering. And one of these guys, Sir Francis Drake, is going to be the most famous privateer, which is a nice way of saying pirate, of the 1500s. Okay? A very adventurous guy. I kind of talked about him in the Empires. But there are also going to be people like Sir Humphrey Gilbert and Sir Walter Raleigh, who she encourages during the Elizabethan age to go out and explore and conquer and colonize. She's going to be the one that kind of pushes this forward. All right? And it all comes because the disastrous Armada attack of Spain. When Philip II is spurned by her and promises the Pope to kind of take over England and make it Catholic again, he decides to send the Navy, which The Armada is unmatched in the world. The Spanish, because of all the gold and silver they had stolen from the Aztec and the Incas and all the others, because of all that, they had built up a war chest. They had built an actual navy that was unmatched. This was supposed to be, we sail up there, totally destroy and ravage the English coastline, bring them to their knees, and Elizabeth will either have to apologize to the Pope, or she'll have to marry Philip II. Like they're looking for a way to take England back, if you will. She basically is defiant to the end, so you got to give her credit. A lot of people were saying a woman could not lead England. She is widely considered to be one of the greatest monarchs in English history because she refuses to give in. And she refuses to tell the Pope, I'm sorry, and she refuses to say, oh, well, I guess I'll get married to the King of Spain just to bring peace to my land. No, she is saying we are British and this is who we are, and she kind of draws the line in the sand and says this is what we're going to do, and she convinces people to go along with it. The English are pretty united during this time period against Spanish threats of aggression. So when the Armada invades, a lot of things go wrong for the Armada. Number one, the British have a pretty good plan under Sir Francis Drake, because let's be honest, if you're going to create, Cash, what do you need? Go.
I want to ask you.
That's fine. Bottom line is, when the Armada comes up, they have three things go wrong. One is Sir Francis Drake is put in charge, and look, he's a pirate. He's going to cheat. Okay? He's not going to follow conventional warfare. Conventional warfare is, all right, they're sailing in with really big ships. We meet them with really big ships. We shoot at each other for a while, and whoever wins the battle. Sir Francis Drake goes, we don't have really big ships. We have a few, but not an armada, not a huge fleet, if you will. So instead he comes up with ways to block off ports and make it very difficult for them to navigate. And he also comes up with a plan to light little small ships on fire and send them out into the Armada. Now, why is that a problem? Nobody's on the ships. Like he lights them on fire and they just kind of send them into the formation. I'm sorry? Well, why is it a problem for the Spanish? It sets their ships on fire. These are ships made of wood. Okay, and they're finding in the English Channel, it's not easy to navigate. The English Channel, I mean, it's not exactly like a small little river or anything. It's a very large piece of water, but if you've ever been on the English Channel, I have been on the English Channel once, okay? I made the mistake of taking a ferry between England and France, and it's the same waterway that the soldiers went over on D-Day in 1944 in World War II, okay? And I took the ferry thinking, oh man, I want to kind of walk in the footsteps of these soldiers. I couldn't even stand up on the ferry because the waterway is so choppy and so ridiculous. And it was a clear day. It was a day like today. And yet the water was just, I mean, it was tossing everybody. And this is on a huge ferry that it's carrying people and cars and, cargo and all that. And yet we're still being tossed around. You could not stand up on that without grabbing onto something, okay? So obviously these ships are having a terrible time. These are smaller wooden ships that are having a harder time navigating, and now they got to avoid these ships that are literally doused with fuel and are lit on fire. So not surprisingly, a few of these small little ships smash into the sides of the bigger ships, light them on fire, and they sink, okay? So it at least depletes the amount of ships that they have. As they're trying to do this, a storm kicks up. So that's the second thing that goes wrong. A storm kicks up that blows them all over the place. Of course, they're at the mercy of the wind because they have sail power back then. And it's hard for them to reform back up. Part of the Armada basically turns around, tries to go home, okay, and manages to do it. The other part kind of gets caught in the storm, and when the storm subsides, they turn around to go back for Spain through the English Channel, and Drake's sitting there with the actual English Navy. So now with the depleted resources and with half of the Armada sailing back for Spain already, the other half is trapped, okay? They got to fight it out with Sir Francis Drake, who again doesn't follow traditional rules. So some of them decide instead, you know what, we're going to go around England up above Scotland and then sail around that way to get away from them. Drake lets them go. They hit another storm. They get run aground in Scotland. Now, Scotland at the time doesn't like the English. Okay, they are Catholic, so they don't like the Anglican Church. So the Spanish, when they get, when they crash onto the beaches there, they think, oh, the Scottish people are going to welcome us as conquering heroes. Nope, they cut them up. The Scottish don't like anybody coming onto their shore. Spanish, English, doesn't matter. You're dead. Okay? So they wipe them out completely. The Armada limps back to Spain, has to tell poor Phil, hey, we failed, and your navy is currently sitting at the bottom of the English Channel. Okay? Elizabeth survives, and because of that, England arrives on the scene. Okay? So, not surprising, they are ready for an empire for a multitude of reasons. First of all, the Spanish are forced to have a treaty. They basically call a truce between the two nations. So now that England doesn't have to worry about the Spanish anymore, they're free to set their attentions to other things. They have massive unemployment within the English realm at that time period, so there are a ton of people that have literally nothing to do. And it's also moneyed and landed elite that are unemployed because of primogeniture, which is part of your chapter. Primogeniture, anybody understand what primogeniture is? What it means? Okay, let's say I am a lord of a territory within England, okay? I'm going to go ahead and call myself the Earl of Sandwich, which is a legitimate title. It's my favorite one, okay? There is an area of England called Sandwich, okay? So I'm the Earl of Sandwich. I have, and I can only do it this way, sorry ladies, you don't matter in Elizabethan England. As much as Elizabeth is queen, you just don't matter. So I have all these children, okay? And for those of you at home, I have 11 children, okay? Most of them are female. They're just kind of a drain on my personal economy. You sit around, you eat, you read, you sew, you play some music, but you're not really, the only way you're really going to help me is if I can marry you off to, the Earl of Jersey or Lord Dunmore or Lord this or Duke of that. If I can get you married off to wealthy people, you'll help me, okay? So every time we go to parties, I'm really going to be playing you up. Like, okay? Wingman. See, my daughter Megan here is quite a catch, if you catch my meaning. Okay? Now, of course, I'm just kind of auctioning you off at that point because, Lord Dunmore has a son who's 35 and is really looking for, a wife. It's time for him to settle down after a military career. So I'm promising my 15, 16-year-old daughter to a 35-year-old man. Okay? Hey, you're prime age for childbearing.
That's disgusting.
I told you it's pretty messed up.
Absolutely not.
What did you think I meant by royal and nobility? Like, this is what they do. Okay?
I live in early 20s.
Now, of course, I have 3 sons, and it would be Higgins, Floyd, and Richter back there. Higgins is my oldest son. Okay? Floyd's my second oldest. Chucky's the mistake. Okay? I have 3 sons out of my 11 children. Okay? Higgins is actually the 4th born, okay, but he's my oldest son. So, the 3 girls I had before, Jasper, Carol, and Cash, don't matter. That's the first boy. Okay? Now, according to primogeniture, when I die, who gets my title? Good, you're picking up on this. So Higgins gets every, my title. Who gets the land? You get to be the 2nd Earl of Sandwich. Congratulations, you are correct. Okay, who gets all the land? Higgins. Who gets all the money? Higgins. Who gets the house? Okay, we're picking up on the fact that he gets everything. Okay? Floyd's sitting there going, what the heck, man? Just because I was born, and literally, you could be twins. You're the first one out. Sorry. You beat them by 2 minutes. Okay? Doesn't matter. Okay? But in this case, what ends up happening? When I die, he's responsible, not just for the land, the title, everything, He's also responsible for all of his siblings that have yet to be married off. So if I die and all I was able to do was marry off two of my oldest, it's now Higgins' job to figure out what to do with his older sister, who is now way too old to actually get married to anybody reputable. Okay, so what ends up happening with that one, sorry Cash, this is going to end poorly for you. What ends up happening is Cash at the time is, 18, 19 years old. She's past her prime. You've already had your debut ball and nobody took the bait. Okay? What ends up happening is because he can't find a landed person that wants it, instead he finds somebody that's 58, the wife just died, and he's looking for companionship. So he offers your brother 50 heads of cattle and a couple of goats, and off you go. And the only reason he did that is he doesn't want you sitting around the house eating his food. Well, too bad. Maybe he'll take care of you. It's not his problem anymore. Okay? All of you younger sisters, it's his responsibility to throw debut balls to try and kind of advertise you to the other young-ish men. Okay? People in their 20s or 30s. Okay? But again, he's trying to... And look, he's looking for alliances too, because here's the thing. Not only did he get my title, he's also got my spot in the House of Lords. Okay? So he's in the government just because he's a lord of the manor. Okay? So he's got that, and he's always looking politically to find good, solid alliances. So it's his responsibility to be political in your marriage. You're not marrying for love, that's for sure. You're marrying who he tells you to. Otherwise, he can just kick you out of the house.
Absolutely not.
Okay? Now, that's for the females. The males, Floyd, close but no cigar. He's got choices. His choice, he can become a priest. He can go into the military and hopefully get some glory. And if he's really lucky, his brother will provide him some money to go off and buy a military title. You get to be a lieutenant if he gives you enough money. That way you're not just a foot soldier, because that, you've been living in this great big house on this landed, you're just kind of hoping that maybe he kicks in some cash for you, okay? In reality, what Floyd is hoping for is that Higgins accidentally on purpose gets smallpox and dies. Because if his brother dies, who then becomes the third Earl of Sandwich? Yes, it would be Floyd. Okay? Now, why would he get that title? Because Higgins hasn't married himself yet. Because, he's in his 20s and he's enjoying himself.
So men get to have fun and marry whoever they want. And then women are just sitting here 15 years old having kids.
For those of you at home, Stauffer's getting very upset, and she's absolutely right. Men get to have fun, women not so much. Okay? Keep in mind, Stauffer, you're getting all upset. What about poor Chucky back there? The baby of the family.
I think he should be.
Here's the thing. Chucky has the same options that Floyd does, but on a lesser scale. Okay? He can go in, and most likely he's probably, if he's at all devout or not, he'll go into the Catholic Church and become, and in this case, the Anglican Church. Okay? Why? If he can get a parish to kind of adopt him as a priest, they'll take care of his housing, they'll take care of his food. He's used to being taken care of. Okay? But what happens if he doesn't find that? He's unemployed. Yes?
What happens if all three of the boys die? Who gets the land then?
What happens if all three of it? It reverts to the king. And then the king decides what to do with the family estate. Here's the thing, and this is a good question. As soon as I die, Higgins immediately is like, got to get married. Okay? He's immediately looking for somebody to get married and have a child because he knows his responsibility at this point is to have a male heir. He has to have a son. Now, at this time, not only is he trying, Floyd is also searching. Now, he can search for a number of different things. Since he's part of this family, and he's got a boatload of sisters and stuff, he actually might be trying to ask you, hey, did your friend talk about me at the ball last week? Because he's trying to maneuver to get married into a wealthy family that maybe doesn't have a male heir. So he becomes the son-in-law at a place where there is no son to inherit. So you're maneuvering in to try and take somebody else's title. Okay? Again, what is Chucky doing?
Nothing.
He's struggling. Okay? Yes, Miss Carol.
Again, okay, so, you know how, like, in royalty, if the king had a son with another woman, the son couldn't take claim of the throne? It's like the same thing.
Yeah, Higgins can go out and have all kinds of fun with the commoners, have
Right.
kids, and those kids will never, ever inherit that thing.
That's horrible.
So when Stauffer was saying, but the boys get to have fun, that's what we're talking about.
Sounds like
If you're wondering why these guys don't get married until they're 30, 35, it's because they're going around having fun in town.
That makes me sick.
Well, welcome to 16, 1700s England. Do realize that there are authors that made an entire living. Jane Austen, if you've ever heard of Jane Austen, she made a living off of this. If you ever read Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, Persuasion, it's all about this stuff. Okay, going to parties and specifically trying to make matches. Okay, so they have something to do. Now, why does this play into this? Chucky may look at Higgins and say, hey, I'm not very religious. I really don't want to serve in the military. Can you just give me some cash to where I can buy into a colonial venture? Meaning he's going to go try and found a colony somewhere, okay? Or work with what are known as joint stock companies, if you remember. You know, I'm going to buy shares in the Virginia company or another company like that, trying to make some money off to the side. He's going to become a merchant, if you will, which was looked down upon by people like Higgins. Okay, that's looked down upon because you have to go work. Okay, because Higgins just sits in the house and runs the household. He doesn't actually do the farming. Okay. And look, if you want to see a modern day example of this, if you've never seen or heard of the show Downton Abbey is still stuck in this mentality. Okay, it's a show that's literally from the early 1900s about English landed elite trying to adapt to the modern world. Okay, if you've never seen it, you really should. Okay, it's fantastically written. Okay, and I promise you, if you're not hooked by the first show starts off with the Titanic sinking, okay? And they don't actually show it. They're getting the information that the Titanic has sunk, and the heir to the family has drowned on the Titanic. And it's the family trying to figure out, well, what do we do now? Because there's no son. Okay, it's a bunch of daughters. Okay? It's insanely well written. Okay, yes?
Okay, so like, backstory, 45% of my knowledge is of like this time period is from that show on Netflix I was telling you about. Anyway,
What show?
Rain, the one I was talking
Oh.
about. So didn't like daughters have like dowries or whatever, like
Yes.
money to their name, but they couldn't get it unless they were married, and when they were married, it immediately went to the husband, so they had no. Like,
Correct. So here's the deal. And I'm glad you brought up dowries, because I kind of forgot, I glossed over that. He only has so much money, and so much land, and so much property. And look at all the sisters he has.
Yay.
So when I die, he is cursing the fact that I had so many siblings. Okay? Because now the choice is you either live in the house for the rest of your life and drain all of his resources, or he marries you off. Now, if you're his favorite sister, he might give you a huge dowry, okay, to reward the fact that you're just a good sister and he loves you very much and he wants to take care of you. Now, why? Whoever comes in is probably going to need the cash, probably going to need the resources, and they're going to honor the fact that, hey, I wouldn't be where I'm at without my wife. But does the wife own any of that stuff? No. And if, let's say you're the favorite sister, and he gives you this massive dowry, and so you get married to Lord North, who's, the head of the King's Council, and you're like on the royal court, that just means you get to wear really nice dresses and go to the best parties.
That sounds nice.
Women have like no like.
But your husband might be 55 years old, okay, and you might be 20. Okay?
Women aren't allowed to cheat. Only men can do that, right?
I'm sorry?
Women aren't allowed to cheat. Only men can do that, right? Because like that's what the king.
Well, do realize if you go back and read British history, it's filthy all the way across the board. Because here's what always gets lost on this. Whenever people are like, oh, men go off and they have all this fun and stuff like that. Well, who are they having fun with? They can't do it by themselves. If they're having relationships and bastard children, there are women involved. Now, some are women of ill repute, meaning they're visiting prostitutes, or they're women of lower class standing, meaning they're having relations with the cleaning staff, okay? And the cleaning staff is just hoping, because here's the thing, if, let's say, the maid, let's say Higgins has been having all kinds of fun with the maid for years, and then the maid gets pregnant. The maid's going to be taken care of because that's his kid. He's still going to take care of the kid. Now, he may deny the kid, and that's even more of a problem for that maid. But if he likes the girl, he's not gonna completely leave her out, and he might actually just hire the kid. The weird thing is, every once in a while, they hire on the kid to be like something within the house. You're going to be the coal boy, or you're going to be something. They hire them on, and they have no clue that he's been working for his father the entire time. Okay? There's a lot of dirty laundry in English history. Okay? But to answer your question, are some of the, so for example, let's say you are, farmed out, if you will, to Lord North. And Lord North, let's say he's 60 years old, and he's really not interested in having children or anything like that, which you may look at that and be like, I'm fine with that. You have your own wing of the house that is your own. You live in luxury. That may be a perfect situation for you. Is there a possibility that you're going to have some dalliances with some other people throughout your life? Yeah. That could happen. That happens after, let's say, Lord North dies at 65. You're a widow at 25. You might just kind of enjoy yourself for a few years because you're still living in the house. And let's say maybe you did manage to have a child with Lord North, and it's a boy, and that's who's going to inherit the house because that's the next Lord North. You may help raise your child within that household, and when he gets old enough, he becomes the lord of the manor, and he just takes care of you for the rest of your life. There's a lot of gamesmanship in relationships within this elite level. Okay, so again, getting back to good old Chucky here being unemployed. Okay, he gets money from Higgins, and Higgins is fine to send him away because maybe he goes and gets lost at sea. Okay, maybe he goes over and founds a colony and doesn't come back to England. Because it's somebody who's a rival for his landed elite. Like, he wants his brothers gone. Very rarely do you have brothers that really are close. Okay, when we talk about the American Revolution, the Howe family, they are very close. Okay, but they're an exception to the rule. Okay, others that we're going to talk about, Lord Cornwallis. Cornwallis was a very nice man unless you were his brother. Like, he sent his brother over to India to fight, bought him a commission to go over and fight in India, and he died. And he didn't even hold a funeral for the guy. They asked, do you want his remains to be brought back? And he went, no, just keep him in India, that's fine. Bury him where he was. Everybody was like, oh, well, that was honorable. Bury him with his men. He was like, sure. It was just like, I don't want them to be here.
I don't even want his corpse here.
And you might actually be like that. Higgins might be like, let's say Floyd, you do that exact thing. You pay for him to go off and fight, and he dies in France. You might be like, oh, that's terrible. Is he buried? Yeah. Well, leave him there. Well, would you like to pay for a stone? He wouldn't want that. A marker? Nah. There are unmarked graves all throughout Europe just because people refuse to pay for it. Okay? So again, it could be very cold. Okay? They could also have a very warm relationship, but in this case, no. I didn't raise my sons to be close. I raised them to be men. You will go off and serve your country because he's busy running the estate. Okay? So again, there are issues here. There are issues with religious freedom. What happens if I'm a good, solid Catholic and I refuse to change? And Higgins here decides to be, in his teenage angst, he decides to be Anglican. Because that's what good English people are. There's a good chance I might actually take him out of my will and skip it over to my good Catholic boy. And then you're cut out. You know, like this kind of stuff happened all the time. Okay, if you think you have family issues, the English take it to another level when they add in this. Okay, and of course there are adventurers. Maybe Chucky is adventurous and he wants to go over and discover new lands. Okay, and keep in mind as well, there are some people that went against the grain. Maybe Higgins is like, you know, I inherited this land and this title and it's great and everything, but all I want to do is sail. I want to go out on the Atlantic Ocean. I've read all these journals and I've looked at all these maps and I want to explore the world. And his brother Floyd goes, yeah, that would be great. You should do that. And all the while he's hoping that he just gets lost at sea. Okay? I mean, there are different levels to this English settlement. Okay? Now, the one that we're going to talk about is Jamestown. Keep in mind they tried beforehand to settle a number of different places. They tried and failed in Canada. That was Sir Humphrey Gilbert. He tried desperately to settle Newfoundland, okay, the newfound land that the Vikings had found way back in the 1200s. Okay? They tried desperately to settle that. It didn't work. Gilbert even died trying to do it. They tried to settle Roanoke. That was Sir Walter Raleigh's failed colony. The first time it failed because the people just gave up and went home. The second time we have no idea what happened to them. So that's considered the lost colony of Roanoke, and that happened in the late 1500s. Jamestown comes along in 1607. Now, why does Jamestown succeed? Mostly it's through the efforts of this man. This man is Captain John Smith. This is the Disney rendering of Captain John Smith. They are not the same guy. Okay? Yes?
Isn't that the guy from Pocahontas?
Yes.
And doesn't she, like, in real life, she marry someone completely different?
Correct.
Okay, that's what I thought.
There is, you reference Pocahontas, this is the only time that you're to reference that movie at all. This is it, because it's garbage. There are two films that I absolutely do not allow in my classroom, Pocahontas and Pearl Harbor. Because when you completely just, you read the history and then go cute and then ignore it in your script, I have a problem with that, okay? This Disney rendering is offensive in a whole host of different ways, especially if you're native, okay? Remember when we were talking about native stereotypes? There are a whole host of native stereotypes. First of all, Jamestown is in what eventual state? Virginia, named after the Virgin Queen, right? Okay, Virginia. Where is Virginia in relation to where we're at? Okay, it is to the east and a little south. We're not talking the deep south like Florida. We're talking just a little south of where we're at. So that means the climate of Virginia would be very similar to ours. Okay? When they depict this in the movie Pocahontas, the colors of the wind as they were leaves blowing around. When do leaves blow around?
Fall.
In the fall, which means what temperature is it?
Fall.
Probably around 60, 70, 80.
And at night? 40s and 50s, right? Probably some frost on the ground. So answer me, why is Pocahontas running around in a mini skirt? Why are all the men in the native tribe bare-chested?
That's a great question.
Because they're racist.
Okay? And by the way, in two scenes in Pocahontas, they have teepees. Okay? Let me ask you something. If you lived out in your backyard, would you want a tent or would you want to construct a hut for the winter months coming up? You know, they're not living in teepees. They're living in mud bricked huts. Pretty thick walls. You know, with an area for a fire inside and a hole in the ceiling so that it, you know, the smoke can get out. Why? Because it's freezing. You know, everything about their, and by the way, at the very beginning of Pocahontas, she's jumping off waterfalls. Has anybody been to the coast? Atlantic coast? Any waterfalls by the Atlantic coast?
No, you had to go
You have to go up into the mountains. It's not along the coast. Coastline is at sea level, or in some places below it because it's swampland. Okay? There are no waterfalls, at least of that magnitude, anywhere in Virginia. There are no trees like Grandmother Willow on the coast. Okay? Why? Hurricanes, floods, you name it. The trees don't grow that large, and they certainly don't have vines, because good old Captain John Smith, who's voiced by Mel Gibson, by the way, is swinging around from vine to vine as if he's in the Brazilian rainforest. And of course, the biggest offense by far, the first contact between Captain John Smith and Pocahontas. Hi, I'm John Smith. Hi, I'm Pocahontas. When did she learn English?
Years later.
Every year I have somebody say, well, Grandmother Willow, like a tree, taught her English. This is what Disney has done to an entire generation of learners, sadly. Okay? Of course, the bigger crime, and it is a crime in this day and age, Captain John Smith was probably in his late 40s, early 50s. Pocahontas was 12, if that. There is no relationship between the two. It's selling her unbelievably short to believe that. Okay? Why? Captain John Smith gets captured by Powhatan, who is Pocahontas' father. Okay? He gets captured by the natives, and he's going to be put to death for the crimes of his colony. There were guys in the colony that had done some terrible things. They had stolen some things, and a few of them had raped native women. Okay? So he was going to kill Captain John Smith to send a message to the colony because John Smith was their leader. And that's the honorable thing to do in the Powhatan tribe. We kill the leader for the sins of the followers. Okay? Pocahontas dives on John Smith not because John Smith is really good looking and, oh man, don't kill this beautiful Mel Gibson voiced man. She realizes geopolitically that it would be a bad idea to kill this man because that would just further anger the colonists and cause a war. So she is diplomatically smarter than everybody else around that campfire. Okay?
And she's only 12.
Yes. Which is why we sell her unbelievably short. She sees that this is not a good thing to do. Convinces her dad to spare his life, and they start negotiations about what land can be used for hunting, what streams can be used for fishing. They negotiate territory. Okay? And it saves the colony. All right? So Pocahontas saves the colony first. What really saves the colony second was Captain John Smith had a you work or you don't eat policy. Why? People like Chucky came over, adventurous, and all his life he had been served breakfast, lunch, and dinner at his house. He had never farmed before. So he kind of expected everybody else to kind of do stuff for him. John Smith comes along and says, no. You're going to get your hands dirty, you're going to farm, you're going to make the food you eat, or you're not going to eat at all. Okay? Even so, unbelievable death rates throughout the first few winters. Okay? The colony barely survives. Okay? John Smith eventually goes home. Yes, sir.
I thought Pocahontas was with, I forget, Lewis and Clark.
That's Sacagawea.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
And that's 200 years later. She would have been unbelievably
I got
old.
them confused.
Okay. Needless to say, Powhatan starts to realize that the British colony, while holding on, is still bolstered in numbers. Over the course of the 16 teens, they start gaining in number. So they start forming what is known as a confederacy. Now, a confederacy, by definition, is a loose association of states. Okay? Meaning it's his tribe and other tribes come together, and what unifies them? They don't want this British presence. Captain John Smith eventually goes back to England, okay, because he was an employee of the Virginia Company. It's not like he was a settler that was going to remain there all of his life. And he's replaced by Lord de la Warr, okay, a very apt title because he brings warfare with him. And he's been told by the Virginia Company, clear the land of any native presence and establish boundaries for that colony.
Wasn't he that dude in the movie? The big one with purple?
No, they made it seem like it's him. Okay, in the movie, God, what, did they call him Sir Walter Raleigh? Because Raleigh was never there. I don't know. I haven't watched that movie since I was 13 because I was so upset at 13 as to how they did everything. Okay, but yeah, you aren't wrong. They took the history book and went, let's just make him be part of it there. Now, to be fair, his mentality would have been that guy's mentality. Okay, at no point were they digging for gold, by the way. They knew there was no gold there because none of the natives were wearing it. The only reason the Spanish knew that gold was available from the Aztecs and silver was available from the Incas is that they had decorated things with it. There was no gold in the eastern woodlands of Virginia. Okay, so needless to say, De La Warr shows up. He immediately starts conflict with the natives, and they have a number of different conflicts. And the reason that the Powhatan tribe comes crashing down are three major reasons. Number one, the smallpox and other diseases that the British had brought with them completely ravaged the tribes. Okay, that's number one. Two, when the English showed up, they were masters at causing dissension amongst the ranks. They played tribes off against each other. So the Confederacy starts to fall apart. And three, they had more firepower. They had guns, they had cannon, they had modern tools of war that the natives just didn't have. Okay? So again, all three of those are reasons that over the course of the teens and 20s in the 1600s, that the Powhatan Confederacy starts to fall apart. Okay? And of course, because of that, there are demographic shifts. Okay? As they come in, and this is where Virginia, modern day Virginia would be, as they start coming into this area, you start seeing tribes being pushed away from the coastline. Okay? And this happens up in New England as well, when the Pilgrims show up. As European settlement happens and there's more push, all the native tribes here start to go into the interior. Now, they're not used to the lifestyle. Now, some of them try and mix in with tribes that are already existing and form almost new tribes in their own right. Okay? There are going to be other tribes that have immediate conflict because now you're falling back on our territory and we're going to fight you, which is another unfortunate thing to happen where native tribes are fighting against each other, when in reality they should probably be joining forces to go against the instigators, if you will. But some of these tribes are going to be forced out entirely. There's a tribe in here called the Lakota, who eventually are going to go way the heck out here, okay, be pushed all the way out here. The Lakota were eastern woodland Native Americans, okay? But with the introduction of the horse and the introduction of European settlement, they moved all the way out to what eventually becomes known as the Great Plains, okay? And they changed their lifestyle entirely because of necessity, okay? Just survival in general. So there are going to be key demographic shifts, and there's going to be trade issues as well. Because some of these native tribes are going to adapt to the point where they realize, okay, this European settlement wants fur, so we're going to go out into the woodlands. We're going to kill raccoon and beaver and other things, and we're going to bring the furs to them. We're going to bring them the pelts and sell the pelts to these colonies. Now, they don't realize that by selling the stuff to the colonies, that the colonies are going to become more successful. And because the colonies become more successful and more lucrative, it's going to spawn more European settlement. Okay? So in a weird way, trade is going to also doom them as much as disease will doom them, as much as warfare will doom them. There's all kinds of factors that are going to play into the eventual destruction of the native tribes, at least the eastern seaboard. Okay? What really saves Virginia is tobacco. This is John Rolfe. You can kind of see Pocahontas right here in the artist rendering. John Rolfe is the guy that comes in. He actually steals tobacco plants from the Spanish and smuggles them in to Virginia and plants them. He realizes that the soil of Virginia is very, very conducive to tobacco being grown. And so tobacco being grown becomes the savior of Jamestown. It's the most lucrative plant they have. They sell absolute, just shiploads full. The British, not as much. I mean, some of the British like it, but the king at the time, James I, of which Jamestown is named, he hated it. He thought it was a disgusting habit. Okay, he didn't like the smell of it. He didn't like the fact that when you put some in your mouth, you had to spit. He thought that was disgusting. He was kind of a germaphobe. So because it wasn't allowed in court, a lot of British didn't take to it, but the French loved it. And so they sold a ton of it, okay? Because of that, tobacco saves Jamestown. The sad thing is that the offshoot to that is tobacco is a very labor-intensive crop. They don't have enough people to work at it. The local natives who they've caught aren't really conducive to it because they keep dying, and so they kind of just have an offshoot of an already existent slave trade between the African coastline and the Spanish and Portuguese colonies. They just add another wing to it, which is where it becomes the triangle trade, okay? They add another stop along the way, and of course those slaves eventually work on these plantations. That starts in 1619. 1619 is a very turning point year, if you will, because slaves are introduced in Jamestown in 1619, and initially they're introduced as what are known as indentured servants. You guys remember this term from 8th grade? The idea that somebody pays for your passage and you work off over time, and then you're kind of freed, given your own land, all that. It starts off that way, and eventually they just kind of adapt to the slave trade, if you will. But it starts in 1619. And then the government of the Jamestown colony is called the House of Burgesses. That meets for the first time in 1619, and it meets merely to handle local issues in the colony, okay? And it's allowed by the Virginia Company at that point, because the Virginia Company was really getting tired of dealing with, and just think of how silly it is, somebody writing you a letter saying, John spit on the sidewalk and I think that's disgusting. Can we eliminate spitting on the sidewalk? So they'd have to send that across the Atlantic Ocean. The Virginia Company would have to be like, do not spit on the sidewalk. The punishment will be 3 days in the stocks, and they'd send it back. And then they'd be like, see, John, John died of smallpox. Never mind. You know, it was very, clunky, if you will. So the Virginia Company finally just says, you know what, why don't you just handle all your local stuff on your own? Stop whining to us. Like, if you have serious problems like, hey, the natives are invading, go ahead and ask for help. But if you have just small little piddly stuff that we don't need to deal with, and weirdly enough, it's that starts off democracy in the New World, okay? Because they have representative democracy, the Virginians kind of get used to it, okay? And this is, weirdly enough, in 1619, the seeds for the American Revolution are planted with that. The seeds for the Civil War are planted in 1619, okay? Because the two issues are going to cause massive problems later on, okay? We're going to talk about Maryland, the Carolinas, and Georgia another day. Just to give you an idea of why the New England colonies were a little different, and this should help you to understand the model of Christian charity and certainly the Mayflower Compact. The Protestant Reformation was happening during this time period where Martin Luther had already kind of established the Protestant faith, but there were, yes? Go ahead. Martin Luther, of course, is the kind of granddaddy of the Protestant faith, if you will. Just go. John Calvin comes along and tries to clean things up a little bit. He gives us this idea of predestination, that you are predestined from birth to be saved and go to heaven or not. Okay? This idea that you live a good life, but it really doesn't matter. God has already determined where you're at. At the time of birth, you were written into the book, and that's the way it is. Well, that caused a tremendous problem within the Protestant faith. There were some people that believed it. There were other people that didn't. And of course, where does it fit into the Anglican faith? And there was just a lot of upheaval within the religious community. So not surprisingly, there was another offshoot of the Anglicans called the Puritans that wanted to purify the Anglican faith. They wanted to get back to the original dogma. Let's get back to the original faith, if you will. Okay? Some Puritans were even more ridiculous about it. They not only wanted to purify, they wanted to separate themselves and form their own group. Okay? Which is not surprising. Once you start splitting things off, you start getting splinter groups all over the place. And some were so out there that King James I tried to quell everything by literally writing an English version of the Bible. And it's called the King James Bible. He has it commissioned during his time, and it's mostly trying to calm people down, like, hey, we're all on the same page, this is what we all read. We're good, and he tried to put it, of course, it's in the English language, So why is that such a big deal? Anybody know? Okay, it wasn't Italian. Latin, okay? So it used to be that your priest was the only one that could read the Bible because, a common Englishman couldn't read Latin, okay? By writing it in English, it made it, and look, most of the time the priests didn't actually know Latin either because remember, who are the priests? Yeah, Chucky and Floyd here. Like you guys are the priests. You're just the second and third born. You got a priesthood because you kind of liked going to church. But can you read Latin? Maybe, maybe not. So again, there were a lot of people in the English realm that were saying, "Look, I don't really like the fact that that's my religious leader." Okay, that guy's scary because I don't think he's. Could you imagine if somebody was like, as it says in the book of Matthew? Do unto others as I say you should do. Like, does it really say that? Like, yeah, that's how it's written here. I'm translating it, of course, for you from Latin. Are you? Yeah, absolutely. What does it say Jesus did? Well, Jesus ate some fish. That's what it says here. You should eat fish. Okay? There were people in England that were saying, I don't know if that's really how it's... It'd be real nice to actually read it for ourselves. So that's kind of what the King James Bible did, is it made it easier for them to also do it if they were reading in English, okay? And it made people also able to read it if they were able to be literate. And the British were surprisingly literate as a society, okay? It doesn't mean that everybody was literate. In fact, it was very small. Believe it or not, the colonies have more literacy than England does by the mid-1700s. We are more literate over here than they are in England. So they were getting rid of some of their most educated people. They call that the brain drain, okay? So, when the British would kind of look at us and say, we are the more advanced society, they're like, we can read the Bible and you can't. Who's advanced now? Okay, we were kind of the thorns in their side. But needless to say, King James I tries to quell it. It doesn't really work for that separatist group. And the separatists flee to Holland, and Holland, of course, the Netherlands, whatever, they're in places like Amsterdam. And here's the thing. Amsterdam is known for a lot of things, but people your age know Amsterdam as being a place where weed is legal, prostitution is legal, pretty much anything is legal. Don't kill anybody, but, just chill. It's a very laid-back society. I have been to Amsterdam. I've never felt more dirty in my life. Okay? You walk through the red light district, and if you don't know what the red light district, that is an area of the city where prostitution is legal, and the prostitutes are literally in shop windows. There's a little red light above the door, and people walk up, and I watched this happen. They walk up, and they're negotiating a price. And as soon as the price is settled, the red light goes on, the guy goes in, curtain is drawn, and business is being transacted. It's really different. Now, to be fair to the Dutch, they have a health care plan for all of their sex industry workers. There is literally a screening process they have to go through. You have to be a licensed prostitute.
So it's like a
Okay.
job.
It's an actual employment. Yes, it's a job. Okay, and
If you go on unemployment,
so they are taken care of completely. Okay. Now, keep in mind, again, that's hard for us to understand because as a society, we're somewhat prudish. Why? We were founded by these people that found it disgusting. Okay? You do realize we are all the rejects of where we came from. We ended up over here because we weren't initially here. Our ancestors were told to leave.
Yay!
If your family's immigrants, we didn't fit in. And the originals, these guys didn't fit in, and they didn't fit in Holland even more than they didn't fit in England. And do you know how bad you have to be and how annoying you have to be to get kicked out of a place that allows weed and prostitution?
have the American.
Because they literally went around condemning everybody and refused to adapt, and they didn't want to speak Dutch. They didn't want to adapt to the language or the customs or the culture. So the Dutch are finally like, you know what, you're killing our buzz, you need to go. We don't care where you go, but you got to get out of here. So sure enough, they hitch a ride on the Mayflower, okay? Now, in third grade, you were taught that the Mayflower, sailing across the Atlantic Ocean, got caught in a storm and went off course and crash landed in what eventually became Massachusetts, and they called it Plymouth Rock, right? Back when you had your first Thanksgiving celebration where some of you dressed up in paper bag loincloths and put feathers in your hair, and
Yeah,
others of you put black construction paper
I was
into,
a pilgrim. I wanted to be
yeah.
Those are
It's a
really
cute
cool.
thing to do with third graders, but that is not what really happened.
I did in kindergarten.
The Mayflower was intended to go to Virginia. 51 passengers on that Mayflower were pilgrims. And they took over the ship
We had work ugly stuff.
and they steered it north. Why? If they go to Virginia, they got to follow the rules and the procedures of the English.
So they hijacked the ship.
They hijacked the ship.
Huh.
Does anybody remember the name of the Native American that helped the pilgrims? You guys remember Squanto?
Yeah.
Remember what they told you about Squanto in third grade?
It was the homies, right?
Oh, they landed and they met Squanto, who taught them how to farm and
Yeah.
helped them set up their colony. Yeah, he was paid to do that. Squanto's an interesting character that we don't know enough about. Squanto was originally from that area, but he was captured by French fur traders. He was taken back to France as a slave. Okay? This happened when he was about 14 years old. He then became back up, he escaped slavery in France, where he doesn't look like anybody in France. Stows away on a ship to England. When he gets to England, he gets hired on, and they figured, all right, if he could stow away on a ship and escape, he must be very intelligent. So they hire him on in a shipping agency, so he goes to sea for a few years as a merchant. Okay? Works for the English, learns the language, okay? And then he gets hired by joint stock companies to scout out locations. Why? That's where he's from. So future colonial endeavors, where would you go? Well, he looks at a map and says, that's where I'm from. And he meets up with a group known as the Pilgrims. Pilgrims say, hey, we're looking for a new colony, if you catch our meaning. We don't want to go to Virginia. He goes, got just the place. They go exactly where he tells them to go on the map, and guess what? He's already there. Hey, park the ship over there. All right, here's the soil. This is what you can grow here. Here's this. Everybody good? All right. He sails back.
It was like a business dude.
Yes.
What?
So,
Taught him how to do everything because that was part of his job. And there was a reason that that whole area was completely open. That's where his tribe used to be. When the Pilgrims got there, they make it seem like the Pilgrims had to build new houses and shelters and stuff. There were already some shelters there. But the native tribe that Squanto was a part of all died of smallpox.
how did Squanto
Didn't they
die of
end up dying of
smallpox when he was
Squanto, again, how did he survive? He's tougher. We don't know enough details about him. He was an interesting cat. Okay? But again, the Mayflower, they make it seem like they're just such nice people. They're not. They're somewhat, let's be honest, they're religious bigots. You believe our way or else. Okay? Keep in mind, these are the people that eventually are going to spawn the witch trials. Okay? So, before they get off the ship, they write the Mayflower Compact. When you read that, for tomorrow's lesson, please make sure that you pay attention to how many people signed it. That's the key. Okay? They then elect William Bradford to run the colony, who gives us at least a day-to-day operation of how the colony runs in Pilgrim's Progress. Okay? So he writes it down. Now, why do we care about that? He gives us some pretty detailed log about what happens in the colony. Okay? It eventually grows into the Massachusetts Bay Colony, which actually ends up being 4 separate colonies coming together. Okay? And the colonies were New Haven, Salem, Plymouth, and what eventually becomes Boston. Okay? Those all fuse into the Massachusetts Bay Colony. And of course, before the colony really forms, they're just kind of a hodgepodge of little, and look, they're all different religious groups. They have no real plan of action, okay? Starting the colony was the idea of bringing them all together and trying to create a bigger entity. And the biggest entity is going to be the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and they put this guy named John Winthrop in charge of it for 30 years. He is going to write the Model of Christian Charity, where he tries to verbalize what the goal is of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. What are they trying to do in this colony? So when you read that today into tomorrow, please make sure you kind of pay attention to what his overall goal is. What is the colony supposed to do? So what are you supposed to get out of the Mayflower Compact? How many people signed? Because remember I told you there are about 100 or so people on the Mayflower. So how many people signed, and we're going to talk about why that matters, okay? The other thing, John Winthrop, what's his overall goal? What's his intended purpose of the Massachusetts Bay Colony? Because remember, the intended purpose of Jamestown was to make money. So what is he trying to do, okay, in the Model of Christian Charity? And then you also have to read the Act of Toleration, which Mr. Ryan is going to be talking to you about tomorrow, okay, about the Catholic faith in Maryland, okay, and the Act of Toleration, if you will, okay? Questions, comments, concerns?
How many things do we have to read?
3 things.
How long are they?
I'm glad you've already paid attention to your assignments. People at home, we'll see you later.